And that's a clip from The Water Diviner. I'm delighted to say we've been joined by its star and its director, Russell Crowe. Russell, how are you, sir?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. There's been talk of you making a directorial debut for a couple of years. What was it about this story that made you think, okay, this is the one?
It's a funny thing. I've been thinking about directing for a long, long time. And, over the years, without making a to-do out of it, I've directed like 30-something rock video clips and 3 full-length docos. About 12 years ago, I had everything that I was going to do, and I got financed in one meeting and all that sort of stuff. And I started to realize that everybody involved in it had no understanding that I might have an actual individual point of view as a director. They were only involved because I was a famous bastard. So I deconstructed that. However, if I'd known it would take me 12 years to get another one going, I would have just gone on and done the job. But yeah, it's been something that's been on my mind for a long time. But in a funny situation, I was just getting on with my life. The year that the script came to me, I did 4 movies. I did actually 5 in 16 months, Man of Steel, Broken City, Les Mis, Noah, and Winter's Tale. Wow. So I was extremely busy. I was developing a whole bunch of other stuff, in between, cattle farms and football clubs and all these other things that I do. And this script came along, and it just hit me at such an essential, visceral level, and then everything changed. So I didn't really choose it. It chose me.
On the first reading?
First
Maybe
reading.
that's all a script gets.
Well, that's 100%. You either connect to something or you don't. And that's what I always look for. I tell to people, it's like you have to respect the gods of film. I don't do a movie based on its pedigree or based on its check. I do whatever the film happens to be. If I read it, and I get that visceral reaction, goosebumps, the churning stomach, a little bit of sweat. You start taking notes on behalf of the character. You start like correcting dialogue or pointing out that bits and pieces don't sort of add up. That's the movie I'm going to do. And so I was having that reaction to the script. But then on top of that, there was this other thing, this voice that was adamant that only I could see this the way it needed to be told, that only I could sort of see in the shadows and read between the lines. And I finished reading it, and I just had this overwhelming thing that I must take responsibility for this story.
What is that, a gut instinct?
Yeah, but I think it's the gut instinct of a director. You've got to take that arrogant perspective that only you can see it the way people should see this story.
You sound as though you've directed like 15 movies.
Well, you see, this funny thing happened a little while ago. I started, I always worked with directors who were significantly older than me. And then there was just this unheard click, and suddenly I'm working with directors who are only younger than me, And it doesn't matter who I work with. I can go on the set with Ridley or whoever, but I've made more movies than they have. I've been on more sets. I've been in that problem-solving bunker more times, I've done, Ridley might have done 20 films. I've done 50, So you amass this, this tertiary education of experience. So at a certain point, it's like, you start to believe that fundamentally you understand the medium significantly more than a lot of the people that you work with. So, you want to step forward. It's a natural transition for an actor like me. Have always been concerned where I am at any point in the story. I've always been focused on the movement of the camera, what the lens is, with the information that the camera requires. I'm not one of those guys or people who believe that either the camera loves you or it doesn't. The camera is inanimate. You have to feed it, So for an actor like that, it's a very natural and simple transition to take that one step more.
So what kind of a director are you?
I try to create an energy around me where everybody knows that they're allowed to be at their very best.
And how would you do that? I mean, you must have learnt, because you've worked with so many extraordinary directors, you've picked up on tips everywhere. But how would people know they've been in a Russell Crowe movie, do you think?
If you talk to the actors, it's because probably in some cases for the first time in their career, they've been scheduled to be prepared. They've had, the boot camp, which puts them, mentally and physically on the road.
What happens at a boot camp?
Oh, man, it's... I had my actors for 10 days. You see, you got to understand, with budgets the way they are these days and what you have to do in terms of getting your financing and stuff, rehearsal's the first thing that gets thrown away. Quite often these days, I'm turning up to a film set 48 hours before we shoot. And you've been required to do your costume fittings and all that sort of stuff in your, in your own time, in your own life kind of thing. But I know that that's not the best way. And so it was very important to me. So one of my assets, was having a 10-day boot camp and then a 2-week period of rehearsal. So at this boot camp, you might start at dawn, you might go for a walk, you might do some yoga, you might do an intense weight session, you might go on a 50K bike ride, you'll go and do your horse riding lessons, you'll do your weaponry training.
Wow.
And at nighttime, you'll do lectures about the geopolitics of the time, the history of the Ottoman Empire, and the next day you get up and do it all over again. And sometimes I'll take you on a really heavy sort of 12-hour day, and at the end of the 12-hour day, here's your bow and arrow, you've got to shoot 3 bullseyes before you can eat. Because I need to know that the people who are working with me understand that they still have to come up with ideas in the 12th hour. If they run out of juice in the 6th hour, they're of no use on my film set.
Is working for you more exhausting than working for Michael Mann then? Because
No. I did a 24-hour workday with Michael Mann once.
I was thinking that must be the inspiration for all that.
Yeah, but see, again, with that, with Michael Mann, we had hardly any rehearsal, and you sort of had to give over to the process, without it being formal, But see, the thing is, I'm not a screamer. I'm not a punisher, because I don't have to. Because I've been very careful with the choice and the selection of not only my cast but every single person that's on that crew.
Do people expect you to be a shouter? I
think people expected me to be significantly more aggressive, in terms of how we're going about things. But I'm a member of this tribe, man. I've been in front of the camera since I was 6 years old. I've been making feature films. I've been doing lead roles in feature films for 25 years. I speak this language. I am one of these gypsies. So it's very easy for me in terms of knowing exactly what a crew want to hear and need to hear first thing in the morning, so your day goes more efficiently. I understand the intimacy you have to have with an actor to bring the best out of them. So, that old saying, walk softly and carry a big stick,
But directing for a debut and also being the star brings a particular burden or sense of responsibility or sense of difficulty. We spoke to Ben Stiller about it a couple of years ago, but did that make you pause just for a moment? Did you fancy directing it and not being in it?
Oh, yeah. I tried that one. Didn't work. Because once we agreed to it and everything, we had the investors on board. I thought, right,
they want you.
Now I'll do the shimmy, right? And I'll be like, second British soldier from the left, And they were like, no. We see where you're going with this. You have to be the dude, So, film is a relentless task. Talking before about budgets and defined assets and stuff like that. You have to be so prepared these days in order to get insured and financed, and you must meet that relentless task with an equally relentless energy. But I know this. I've grown up doing this, and I know no matter how much planning you've done, there will be on a regular basis stuff that just falls out of the sky that you could never have imagined, I'll give you an example. We were shooting in a place called Quorn, Quorn, which is outback of South Australia. It's one of the only places, one of 2 or 3 places in Australia where they still run a steam train, And so we were going to do this sequence, which involves, a Greek Evzoni attack on a train. We've got explosions, we've got, people dying and, glass shattering and all this sort of stuff. And, we turn up on day one and it's 49.5 degrees Celsius. It's 121.6 Fahrenheit.
Wow.
There's a total fire ban and we're there to shoot a steam train sequence. You can't move a steam train without fire. It's just a little problem you've got to solve first thing in the morning,
And a tip, how in case we find ourselves in a similar situation, how do you...
Have a diesel engine on standby.
There you go. So you mentioned the dude. You said, no, the backers say you've got to play the dude. And I'm aware we haven't told the story. So tell us about Joshua Connor and the story that you're telling here.
Well, The Water Diviner follows a man called Joshua Connor. Joshua has 3 sons. And they all put up their hands and volunteer to go to war. They get news from the front that all 3 of their boys have been shot in the same day. The grief of that eventually drives Joshua's wife to suicide. So now he has nothing left. And based on a graveside promise, he travels halfway around the world searching for the bones of his children.
One of the most remarkable things about the story, because some of the aspects of the story we're familiar with, and we'll know the story of Gallipoli, but you take the story on further than that, and you've already alluded to the Turks and the Greeks carrying on fighting after the First World War, which I don't think I knew about. And you also are clearly at great pains to portray the Turks sympathetically and to make it very clear that they have been losers too.
The thing that people don't seem to understand, and that I found was quite sort of surprising, is the Turks were British allies for 150 years. You know, we fought side by side with the Turks in the Crimea, for example, you know. And there was this sort of political situation that happened, driven, you know, most likely by Winston Churchill. He saw that the Ottoman Empire was weakening. It was actually known as the sick man of Europe. And he also saw that the lands that the Ottoman Empire occupied were oil rich. And you're talking about a time in history where motor vehicles are coming online, you know, tanks, and so the use of oil is increasing. The Turks very clearly said to Britain and to France, we wish to remain neutral. We don't want to engage in this. We don't have the money to get engaged in another war. Now, at that time, they had paid for some battleships to be built. And those battleships were being built in Britain. They needed those battleships to defend themselves, you know, and keep the Bosphorus clear, because Russia was quite unstable, and Russia was just above them. And Winston refused to deliver the battleships, trying to make them, you know, choose sides. And the Kaiser of Germany heard about this, and he sent the Pasha of the Ottoman Empire 8 battleships as a present. So that's why the Ottomans connected to the Germans. But you think about the long game that Churchill played, you know, the failed naval attack on the Dardanelles, the failed land battle. But in the fullness of time, at the end of the conflict, which, you know, Britain and the Allies won, and he knew that they would, Britain is now at the head of the table for the divvy up of the Ottoman Empire. So Britain gets to decide who gets what. And that is the genius of Winston Churchill. Machiavellian as it may be.
Yes. Is it fair to say that the Brits in this movie are, by and large, unsympathetically portrayed?
I don't think that's really fair, because, you know, the first Brit that you meet is a jovial Scotsman who thinks it's quite funny that Joshua just had his bag stolen by a Turkish kid, right? So you have that kind of happy-go-lucky attitude, you know, a man who's probably seen some horrific things, but, you know, he's decided to take a positive attitude to life. Then you have a man who's caught up in the bureaucracy of it, a man who is overseeing the burial of essentially hundreds of thousands of bodies. And, you know, his office is full of file cabinet after file cabinet. So he's going to have a particular attitude. And somebody like Joshua coming into his life is like, he just doesn't want him around. You know, he doesn't see the point of this, because what Joshua is talking to him about is just impossible. It's an impossible thing. You know, you're coming here 4 years after the battle saying that you're going to go to a battlefield that has, you know, been rained on, snowed on, moved around, everything. You're going to tell me, you know, out of the 10,000 sets of bones for Australians and New Zealand, you're going to actually come across your sons, you know. So just go away is basically what he's saying. So, yeah, he's a little bit harsh. But then you have a third British character, which is the young naval lieutenant that at one point in time, Lieutenant says to Joshua, you know, my brother died on that bloody peninsula. My fiancée works for the Red Cross. If it's helpful, I can arrange an appointment. And based, you know, with a handshake, you know, Joshua thanks him for that. So I think that there is a balance. There's so many other Gallipoli pieces spend so much time pointing fingers as opposed to, you know, telling the tales of the young men who made sacrifice. So, you know, it was a choice of mine to actually not bother with that, you know, which is, funnily enough, pretty much the attitude of Australians these days. They realise that it's way too simple to point the finger at Britain.
Two questions for you. I mean, fantastic success already for this movie. The Australian Film Awards, you've shared Best Picture with Babadook. Did that scare you, by the way, Babadook? Did you see that movie?
I haven't actually seen it, but I've seen parts of it, and it's pretty cool. Right?
And I wonder, because I think I'm right in saying you said that you thought you had the best job in the world, and then now you've realised that there's a better job directing. Are we going to be seeing you do more now you've got a taste for this?
Well, here's the risk that I've taken in my life. It's taken me 3 years to complete this film, you know, for not a lot of dosh. And the gamble is that if I get a commercial return for the investors, they'll leave their nut in and I can just do another one, you know, which puts me in control of my time. As a gun-for-hire actor, you have to go where the work is. You know, if somebody wants to shoot something in the deserts, you know, of Morocco, then that's where you got to go. You can't shoot that in, you know, Woolloomooloo in Sydney, you know, which takes me away from my kids a lot, you know. But if I'm in control of that sort of creative area, if I'm directing films, then I can do all of my pre-production and post-production in Sydney, and I increase the amount of time that I have in Australia. So that's the risk. That's what's on the line. If I get a commercial result out of this, I simply get to be with my children more often.
And when you asked your followers on Twitter, Russell, whether you should buy Leeds United, what did they say?
Quite an overwhelmingly positive thing, really. Here's what I want to say about that, right? I followed Leeds since I was a little kid, you know. I used to come home from sport in the afternoon, me and my brother, and watch Match of the Day. You know, you're talking about a period of time in Australia where you had very few TV channels, you know.
And he's Liverpool, isn't he?
He chose Liverpool, yeah. And I love the club. I want nothing but success for the club. But like many other Leeds fans, and probably, in fact, 99.9%, I'm getting a little impatient, you know. And, some of your listeners may not know that I own a rugby league team in Australia, which again is my childhood team, and they were a champion team when I was younger, and then they'd fallen into the state of disarray, and they were perennial losers. So 9 years ago, I put my checkbook where my mouth is and bought the club, and step by step, changing the culture, changing the merchandise, changing the player roster, changing the coaching staff, changing the administrative staff, and changing our connection to our community. We've risen from being perennial losers to being competitive, to being dominant, and now we're champions. You know, we won on October 5th last year, the NRL Championship for the first time in 43 years. And we came over here earlier this year and played for the World Club Challenge against St Helens. St Helens amassed a score of 0. We managed to put together 39, so we took that trophy as well. We currently hold, South Sydney, every single trophy in the rugby league world that we're allowed to compete for. So that's an incredible turnaround. So I know when it comes to sport that it's not necessarily about money. It's about culture. And I've learnt a lot in 9 years. And it would give me nothing but pleasure to see that white army marching on together, getting back in the premiership and being where they should be.
Russell Crowe, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Cheers, man.